Good morning. Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for day 2 of the Canada-Turkey Hydrogen Technologies Workshop. Yesterday we had many great exchanges, so we hope to have the same again today. Yesterday we had several panels from academics, from the private sector, and also some speakers from government. For those of you who were here yesterday, I apologize. I will be repeating a little bit of the same messaging, but thank you for joining us again today. So my name is Naomi Gilker. I'm one of the trade commissioners based in Turkey. I work for the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service, and I'm based at the Consulate General of Canada in Turkey. So with that in mind, I know I'm not the expert. I'm not the one that you want to see or hear from. So we'll very quickly hand it over to our first presenter, Professor Li, or CJ, as he's asked for me to call him. Thank you for simplifying that. After Professor Li, we will hear from a panel discussion that will be moderated by Robert Stasko. And then we will have a final presentation after that, and then some closing remarks and a bit of a wrap up. So with that in mind, please, Professor Li, I hand the floor over to you.
Good morning, good afternoon. Thanks, Naomi, for the introduction. Also, thanks, Ibrahim, for the invitation. First of all, I apologize because I have several other meetings going on at the same time. I was not able, and I'm not able to have more discussion. Probably I'll try to log in later today if it's possible into the discussions. My talk is briefly discussing about the possibility of using the liquid organics as, in particular, liquid aromatics as a hydrogen storage media. All right, of course, the hydrogen economy plays a very important role in the future energy sustainability, and for several reasons. One, if you compare, for example, the hydrogens with other fuels commonly available, such as gas, petroleum, the coal and ethanol, the hydrogen has a much higher energy density. And also the hydrogen, when you burn them and produce water, so if you have a clean hydrogen production, and then it's overall will be a zero pollution. And also in the universe, hydrogen is actually the most abundant, even on the planet Earth. Even though it's less abundant, but on the surface, we have a lot of water, so a lot of hydrogen. And of course, if we have a good way to separate the hydrogen from the water, and then the overall, it will be a very good sustainable energy vehicle. So let's take a look at of course, now the hydrogen economy become really a key the area in terms of future development. In terms of hydrogen economy, there are really two different things, very important. One is the green hydrogen production. So it's really ultimately is through the solar energy, from the photolysis, from electrical power, hydropower, from the wind power, but they all related to the solar energy. So once you have the solar energy and you can split the hydrogen from water, then you can produce really the green hydrogen. So once you produce the hydrogen, of course, the other thing is about the storage and the transportation. It's also very important. And in fact, right now, I think the bottleneck for hydrogen economy actually is the storage and the transportation, because we have a lot of progress in terms of how to produce hydrogen. So of course, for the hydrogen storage, you have the traditional way of using tanks at a low temperature or very high pressure. And you have the different absorbents, such as a metal organic framework, and also you have the metal hydride, as well as some other materials, such as the boron nitride. One of the problems with hydrogen is it has a very low density at the atoms of pressure. It's only 1 of 10,000 of related to water. And so here are the different storage, the methods and drawbacks. And for example, liquid hydrogens are great because of pure hydrogen. The problems you have to use to 253 degrees centigrade or 70 atoms of pressure. or use metal hydride, the problem is with you have the very poor reversibility, right, to regenerate, and the physical absorbance usually the capacity is low. So here's the DOE, the U.S. Department of Energy's the sort of like the roadmap, and comparing the different the measures and the targets of DOE. And of course, from this picture, really currently none of the system available can meet the target of the U.S. Department of Energy's in terms of the hydrogen economy for practice, really the ideal or the wishful applications. And there are some interesting things for the possibility of using liquid organics or even ammonia for hydrogen storage. So these are the small molecules on top, like methanol, formic acid, ammonia, ethylene glycol. And alternatively, you also have the possibility of using aromatics as the hydrogen storage media. In this case, you put hydrogen in, becomes saturated, and then use a catalyst, and you can remove the hydrogen, now becomes the aromatics. So in terms of liquid organic hydrogen carriers, so there you have to look at the several different things, the capacity, and also you want the material to be liquid if it's possible. So some of the aromatic molecules on the left, where, for example, the simplest one will be benzene, and then also some other heteroaromatics. And in principle, if you use a little bit of pressure with a catalyst, and you can put the hydrogen into the aromatic, now becomes saturated the hydrogen-rich ring, and then use a different catalyst or the same catalyst, and potentially can also, when you reduce the pressure, you can release the hydrogen. So that's the overall thinking. The advantage, first of all, you use the aromatics, you have very high the energy density, and also very low cost. In fact, use a simple organics, the cost is much lower than all the other method with the chemical method, for example, and also the liquid is stable. It can be transported like any other the chemical, like petroleum or even water, so you can transport, use a regular tank at a regular pressure. So it's a much safer and easy way to handle. Again, the with if you look at the volume capacity and the gravimetric capacity, and in fact, the use liquid aromatic falls perfectly into the U.S. Department of Energy's target. And right now, actually, of course, a lot of interest in using the aromatics as the hydrogen carrier over the last 20 years or so. There are two major companies, one in Japan and one in Germany, really currently looking at the testing of these user model storage for hydrogen storage use liquid aromatics. But it's not commercialized yet. So let's take a look at compare the capacity of using liquid aromatic related to other different ways to store energy. Of course, the oldest or traditional method, which is currently available in large quantity, is through the pumping of water, right? From the water from lower part and to the higher part, and it requires, if you want to store about 10 million watts of the energy, or megawatts of the energy, and requires about 33,000 the cubic meter of water above 100 meters. And if you use the compressed air, and then you need a 60 bar and also a 1,000 the 580 cubic meter. And of course, the other ways currently available in all the automobiles and etc. So using lithium battery, you need about 38 to 100 tons with the 17 to 40 cubic meters in terms of space. And in terms of hydrogenic, actually require much less space. For example, using the tanks with 1 atom pressure, because of low density, density, and actually requires a lot of 100 cubic meters. However, if you use high pressure as a tank, and with a 200 bar, and you can use only 27 cubic meters. But if you go to even higher pressure, I guess 80. And of course, the highest density is liquid hydrogen, and at minus 253 degrees centigrade. And in this case, only requires 4.2 cubic meters. So that's currently technology mostly for hydrogen transport and storage. However, if you look at using the liquid aromatics, it's only slightly above pure liquid hydrogen. So it's almost the same level. So therefore, you have compared all the other methods besides the liquid hydrogen. This will be the really an ideal storage method. So and I mentioned before, if you want to use the aromatic hydrogen, there are really two things. One is to remove the hydrogen easily, and then to put the hydrogen back in. And in fact, to put the hydrogen into the aromatic is much easier. And in fact, it's an exothermic process. Energetically very favorable, and many catalysts can do that. So the problem is how to remove the hydrogen, to take hydrogen out, and we will need it. Okay, so here, so typically there are many methods being reported, including the method, for example, by the German companies and also the Japanese companies, and typically require at least 230 degrees centigrade or high, usually 250 or even higher temperature. And to put the hydrogen in, you only require a little bit of temperature will be fine. But to remove it, and including all these catalysts, requires a very high temperature. So the problem of that high temperature is with the state of the art is very quickly all the catalysts will be dead because of the carbonization of the aromatic on the surface of the catalyst. So currently they have to, after a little while, they have to burn the catalyst, regenerate, and then start it again and then reburn. So it's very tedious and also energy, of course, intensive, because you also have to, you have to stop it, right? Really make everything very difficult. So the reason why we have to go to that high temperature again is to remove the hydrogen. It's really requires a lot of energy. It's thermodynamically unfavorable. So because of the so that's the reason you need a high temperature. And so we actually started the hydrogen storage work about around nearly 10 years ago. So actually, from a different story, our lab invented several technologies where we can convert methane into a benzene or some other of the organic molecules with very high efficiency at a low temperature. For some of course, some of the people from the industry or government, if you're interested, we can discuss about that from McGill. So we have several technologies to convert methane natural gas with high pressure, with high efficiency, low temperature. This product actually so far with the highest efficiency at the low temperature. And one of them is producing the aromatics with light or thermal conditions. We can produce these. And on the other side is we have a lot of hydrogens available. And then we said, can we utilize these hydrogens? And then if we, of course, can we put back hydrogen into the aromatic? If we can do that, now potentially we'll have a way to store hydrogen because in principle, because these are generating hydrogen and then we can put it back. So with this idea, and a few years ago, we developed a catalyst system where really it's a platinum doped on the titanium oxide. And in this case, we found without light at 50 degrees centigrade or above, you get a quantitative hydrogenation. So the hydrogen completely stored from the aromatics into the saturated system. And of course, as I mentioned, this is easy as the problem how to remove it. And we found, and if we lower to room temperature, or if we higher temperature, it will be even faster. The only thing is once we put a light, and then you can really take the hydrogen out quantitatively, 100% literally, and to become pure hydrogen gas. So the good thing about this is because it's a room temperature, and so there's no carbonization. We run for over 100 times. You don't see any carbon production on the catalyst surface, and in fact, we have exactly same efficiency after the 100 times of recycling. So the catalyst is still working well. So we did a calculation. So in terms of the, as I mentioned, from the aromatics to from the saturated system to the aromatics, required to remove the hydrogen, and its energy requires energy. It turned out it's exactly, the energy is exactly like a water splitting. So in terms of volume-wise, 1 milliliter of water and 1 milliliter of this saturated system, you have exactly same amount of energy required. And we also look at the. So here is the reason why how working on this. So basically, we need the active energy. So really, the light gives the energy to jump from the starting module to the transition state and finally produce the product. Right? So they compensate this energy requirement. Again, here is at the bottom, just shows it's completely reversible at the room temperature with the light, and then the dark at the high, you produce the saturated system. Of course, if you increase the temperature, you increase the rate of both. The problem is, and with light, for example, then some of the product will go to the starting. If you don't have the temperature, the room temperature doesn't go to the saturated system, so there's no equilibrium. Only goes to the dehydrogenation product. And so what on the right hand side is really the mechanism is basically the electrons from the semiconductor given to the platinum, and then platinum does the job. So the advantage is saving energy consumption, and also the breaks the thermodynamic limitation, and then the very mild condition. And in terms of light, actually the wavelengths, any kind of including of course visible be even stronger, but even all the visible light from 400 to 800 nanometer all work. I'll show you later, and with a very high conversion and high selectivity. So overall, the apparent quantum efficiency is about 6% in terms of light absorbed. Here to show the catalyst, and so we did both before and the after, and then just the catalyst in terms of the microscope analysis. We don't see any change of the catalyst. And we also look at the different size of the catalyst. Turned out about 3 nanometer has the highest efficiency when we doped on the surface. We also look at the different support besides the titanium oxide, and of course the XPS shows the different energy level, basically corresponding to the different electron density on platinum. So we use the different support, and turned out the one platinum on titanium oxide has a really highest efficiency compared to to all the other, both for the forward and backward reaction. And also we look at some other catalysts known for the hydrogenation, dehydrogenation, but again, the platinum has a much higher efficiency, even though the other also work as well. And here to show really the different the wavelengths. As you can see, of course with the longer wavelengths, the energy level is less energetic, so the efficiency is lower, but they are still working. So they all can can produce the entire spectrum, solar spectrum, can be used to produce to generate hydrogen. And also we look at ideally the benzene has the highest hydrogen capacity, the storage capacity compared to all the other aromatic. But the problem, of course, benzene is a little more toxic. And then you can also use the toluene and the xylene to the same thing. Both the hydrogen storage and the hydrogen generation, they have very similar kinetics. Of course, once you have put the substituent on it, the efficiency is slightly lower, but still on the level of the DOE's requirement. And also we did the mechanistic studies, and to show that really of course, it's quite obvious. So the rate limiting step, the difficulty is hydrogen generation step. Here's just to show what happened is really the semiconductor giving the electron. Once the Shannon light generate electron, the electron goes to the platinum. Then platinum give the electron to the sigma antibonding, CH antibonding orbital of the aromatics molecules. And on the bottom is really the overall mechanism of the reaction. So the big picture is ideally in future, and you can imagine just like the oil tank, and now you have the chemical tank where everything stored, all the hydrogen stored, and then once you arrived and potentially find the ways, ideally use really the solar energy and regenerate all the hydrogen and store at the place where you need it. Okay, so that's my group, and I'm collaboration with Professor Zetian. He used to be at McGill, now is in the University of Michigan in the US. And these are the different agencies in Canada provide us support in research. Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you very much. I'm just checking to see if there's any questions in the chat box. So it must have been very clear. If there are any additional questions, maybe, if some come to mind to some of our audience members, and they missed their opportunity to ask them here, my email address is on the website. So if there's anyone who does sort of think of questions, maybe later today or at another point that they would like to ask CJ, please feel free to email them to me, and then I can always pass them on.
Naomi, if you don't mind, can I ask one quick question for that, Professor Li?
Sure, Ibrahim.
Hi. So that is going to be really about efficiency improvement for photocatalytic processes. So any specific suggestions in terms of efficiency improvement? Second will be the follow-up scale up. And how do you see the future for this? Thank you.
Right, thank you. It's a very good question, and of course, this storage system, first of all, is unlike the other storage. It's complementary in a way. It cannot be, for example, put in the car because you need a light to generate it, right? So ideally, this will be a transport system. You go from like one continent or one remote location to another place where you have light, and then you can regenerate hydrogen, put into the big tank in that location, right? So this is really for long, would be ideal for a long distance transport. I think this will be the method. In terms of scaling up, potentially, if you have as long as you have the sunlight, and you can use, for example, the flow tube, and once you go through, you can generate hydrogen. So that's my thinking of the picture. So it cannot put in the car automobile as a storage system.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. Okay, thank you so much. I think in the interest of time, then we'll move on to the panel discussion on hydrogen technology development across Canada. And then I will hand the floor over to our moderator, Mr. Robert Stasko, who's the ED of Hydrogen Business Council Canada, and he's going to tell us a little bit more about that. Robert, over to you.
Over to me. Okay, well, thank you very much, Naomi. So today we have a panel of three industry people who are very active in the area of hydrogen commercialization across Canada. And I'm going to introduce them going from west to east. So the first one will be Shannon Halliday. who's the VP of Sales and Marketing for HTEC, based out of BC. And next we'll have Brent Lakeman, who's the Director of Hydrogen Initiative Edmonton Global in Alberta. And then we'll have Mr. Sierk Coolsma, who's the Sales Director of Xebec Europe. Each of us will give a very short talk, after which we'll open it up for discussion. And in the interest of time, I'm going to let everyone introduce themselves, if you don't mind, and give a short, maybe 2-sentence intro about your affiliation and your interests. So if you don't mind, I'll start off myself. I don't know if Patrick has my slide up. There it is. Thank you. So the Hydrogen Business Council is basically an advocacy group that is also becoming a member-driven association here in Ontario, Canada. We have an affiliation with the national organization, the Canadian Hydrogen and Fuel Cell Association, but we, for the most part, represent the interests of Ontario, and I'll go into why. This is a snapshot of the logos of the various members that we have that are both our sponsors and our members. So here's the GHG releases in Ontario over 30 years by sector. And you'll see that the largest sector has always been transportation. Followed by buildings, followed by industry, and then followed by utilities. But if you look at the bar chart to the right, you'll see that over those 30 years, the electricity generation has dropped dramatically over 30 years, and that's because we've closed our coal plants, mostly. Industry has become very efficient, and also because a lot of it, in fact, is not as heavy as it used to be. So that's gone down. But in fact, the two biggest things that have gone up in terms of emissions over the last 30 years are transportation and buildings. And buildings, space heating is basically tracked with population. So our population has increased dramatically in 30 years. But transportation is dominant in terms of our emission profile. And that, if you broke it down by subsector, which I haven't done, is mostly trucks. Trucks, especially on the 401 corridor between Quebec and Windsor, which is where 25% of all our trade with the US goes. So our target for low-hanging fruit in terms of emission reduction in Ontario is basically converting transportation from diesel to hydrogen. Next slide, please. I'm just one of the reasons that we feel confident that electrification of transportation by manufacturing hydrogen from electricity here in Ontario is because most of our grid right now is zero or low emission. And I'm just showing you our various sources of generation here in Ontario, from hydro to nuclear to solar to wind, which combined only leaves about 5% right now as fossil fired with natural gas. And we expect that will drop to zero by 2030. So if we use off-peak, or in many cases surplus electricity at night, and we have surplus electricity here in Ontario many times in the evening when we actually transport it south of the border, often at below cost. So by harvesting this surplus energy, we can produce hydrogen at night and then repurpose it for transportation. Next slide, please. So this basically shows where most of our electricity is coming from. And one of the reasons Ontario is unique, you'll see the majority of electricity is nuclear based. And this puts us in a unique situation across the country. This is one of the reasons why we're such a big country and each jurisdiction has its own issues. This is ours. And I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much. And now I'll turn it over. We're going west to east. I'm going to turn it over to Shannon.
Thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here, and thank you to all the organizers. So I started my career in hydrogen in the early 2000s and worked for the federal government and had the joy of being able to participate in the International Energy Agency's Hydrogen Implementing Agreement. So I got to go and travel around the world and look at some of these early stage hydrogen projects from renewables, and it really set the tone of how I would like to see hydrogen being involved in our economies and working towards the sustainability of our planet going forward. And so I joined HTEC a year ago. I got out of hydrogen and about 10 years ago, and things were not looking as good for the hydrogen industry, and moved into distributed power, and then saw the light, so to speak, and came back and joined HTEC a year ago, who I'd worked with back in the early 2000s. And I work, I've been with HTEC for a year. I'm also the vice chair of Hydrogen Quebec, which is the industry association under the Canadian Hydrogen Fuel Cell Association. So I wanted to just mention my slide. I have one slide. There we go. I just wanted to show where HTEC was in the clean hydrogen value chain. And so we really like to think of ourselves as the glue of the clean hydrogen value chain. And we design, build, own, and operate production facilities, distribution systems, and fueling stations. And we work very closely with clean energy suppliers and hydrogen consumers. So on the bottom there, you'll see one of our first byproduct hydrogen production facilities. We use our power cubes, which are right beside it, as a distribution method of our hydrogen to our stations. And you'll see one of our stations there getting a hydrogen delivery, and another station with both a Toyota and Toyota Mirai and a Hyundai Nexo fueling up. So we have 4 stations in operation in BC at the moment, in British Columbia. We have 1 station operating in California. We have 1 in operation in Quebec. We have the backdrop here of my slide is the station that we have under construction in Kelowna, which is about 4 hours out of Vancouver. And we have many more stations under construction, and in British Columbia, in Quebec, in Alberta, and are investigating opportunities across the country. In Alberta, we have 1 station that's in design and construction for heavy duty and transit applications. And we also have a project at the Port of LA for fueling heavy duty trucks. And we have our own production facilities that we're building here in British Columbia. And we've partnered with Mitsui on those. So we have actually a couple of hydrogen production facilities that we are opening. And we have some of the interesting things that we've seen in Vancouver is we've been lucky to have a number of stations in a certain geographic area. So we can see the build out of the hydrogen vehicles. So we've really seen an uptake of these hydrogen vehicles at our stations as we've gotten more supply, as more stations have rolled out. So now Toyota has been working with Lyft, which is an exciting rideshare program here, allowing the drivers to lease these vehicles weekly. And as soon as that happened, we saw an immediate uptake of hydrogen at our stations. We see really interesting activity when we open a new station, just see how fueling habits change between new stations and stations that have been in operation. For a while, we opened Canada's first station in 2018 with Shell in Vancouver, or at a Shell location. And so we've really had a really great chance to see how the stations are used over time, what increases are happening and where, and what is causing those increases. And then the last couple months, we've weekly been breaking records for the amount of hydrogen dispensed at our stations. So it's a really exciting time for hydrogen in Canada. And I'm pleased to be sharing this information with you here today, and look forward to the questions.
Thank you very much, Shannon. I think what we'll do is we'll keep our questions till the end, if that's okay. So I'm going to turn it over to Brent now.
Thank you, Robert. Hi, everyone. Excited to be here today at this event. My name is Brent Lakeman. I'm the Director of Hydrogen Initiative with Edmonton Global. And for those that don't know much about Edmonton Global, we're a fairly new organization. We're a regional economic development agency for the Edmonton metropolitan region. So that's a very large area. It's about a third of the population of the province of Alberta. A significant area when we look at the 15 or so municipalities that make up Edmonton Global. And we're looking at really transformational change within the Edmonton region, around the future economy for Edmonton. And hydrogen is really a key part of that. And we've identified hydrogen as a real strategic opportunity for our region, just based again on some of the assets that we have, and I'll speak to that in a moment. So again, we're really excited to be part of the hydrogen conversation. I think we have the COP meeting coming up, focus around net zero, and that's really the game changer, of course, for hydrogen in our region, and why we're seeing a real significant amount of interest and investments over the past several months. I'll speak to that as well. So just a couple slides. Really, we have a strong policy foundation to build from. You would have already heard about the Canadian hydrogen strategy from last year. That really does provide, the overall framework from which we're operating and moving forward on hydrogen. Prior to that, actually, was the Alberta natural gas strategy and vision that included a strong focus on hydrogen as well. That was just, I think, in fall of 2020 as well. But really what came first, and it's on the right side of this slide, but it was really I think an inspirational document for these provincial and national strategies, federal strategies, was work that we did in the province of Alberta, in our region right around Edmonton. We call it our Alberta industrial heartland, where so much of our industrial activity is focused, our chemical sector, our refining sector, many other industries. And it was really bringing together some key stakeholders early last year, actually in early 2020, to really map out the hydrogen opportunity and move forward. And that's really led to what we're calling now the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub, which is a partnership amongst many organizations, our municipalities within the region, as well as Indigenous communities within our region and the federal and provincial governments. And I'll talk about what we're doing to map out really that hydrogen vision. So we'll just go to the next slide, please. I guess, why is this important for our region? We always like to start up with really the economic case. We are a very low cost producer of hydrogen today. We produce about 60% of Canada's hydrogen within our region. Of course, that goes back many, many years, and much of that being produced, without the use of things like carbon capture and storage. But starting about 5 or 6 years ago, through some investments of the province and the federal government, we were able to develop some new infrastructure for CO2 capture and storage, which really allows us to now be a very low-cost producer of large-scale hydrogen and really, low-carbon hydrogen, making use of that carbon capture and storage infrastructure. We have a very large CO2 backbone pipeline that moves CO2 from our industrial heartland to other parts of the province. We have major industry projects like Shell Quest, one of the world-leading CO2 storage projects, that's really put us in this position of being one of the early movers on hydrogen and being able to scale it up very quickly. And that's what we're seeing in some of these announcements over the past several months. And not to say there's not other technologies for hydrogen production. We have great, renewable capacity in Canada as well, and being able to continue to bring the cost down for hydrogen from renewable electricity. But, we are at that strong starting point again with the availability of natural gas, the availability of significant world scale CO2 storage capacity, really right adjacent to our Edmonton region. And we'll go to the next slide. And again, just to highlight a bit some of the infrastructure, and you'll see the logos. There's just been so many announcements going on here in the past several months. But we are already in Canada one of the top 10 global producers of hydrogen, and we're certainly committed to the national goal of being in the top 3 globally. And we really seem to be on our way forward. We have an existing hydrogen heartland pipeline owned by Air Products, which is over 50 kilometers. So again, we have infrastructure in place. We have some of the largest clean hydrogen production projects in the world. Again, the Shell Quest facility as well, where they're capturing CO2 from hydrogen production, and other projects as well in the region. We have the CO2 pipeline infrastructure. I spoke to the Alberta Carbon Trunk Line that moves a couple hundred kilometers from the Edmonton region down to central Alberta. And really some build out of that infrastructure coming in the next couple of years as the province moves forward with a new 10-year framework for CO2 storage that will allow for a very orderly progression of CO2 storage in the region. So again, some experience we have developed and will be developing that we can provide to others around the world. And new hydrogen CCS infrastructure being announced. Really, these are all just some of the facilities, and this is just a small snapshot of some of the announcements since about April, May of 2021 of this year. Air Products, for example, announcing a net zero clean hydrogen facility right in the Edmonton area. That's about $1.3 billion with some future stages. I know they followed up with a similar announcement in Louisiana just a couple of weeks ago, again, building off of that model that they've set forward here for the Edmonton region. Imperial Oil has a renewable diesel announcement that with, again, some hydrogen production being integrated into that project. Other major projects announced by companies like Suncor and ATCO, for example, and CCUS projects as well rolling out within the province. And again, just to also highlight the interest on the export side, we have some investors and industry partners looking at the ammonia opportunity to make use of that hydrogen, clean hydrogen into clean ammonia for export into Asian markets primarily. So Itochu and Petronas, as well as Mitsubishi and Shell exploring that opportunity. And I think maybe just one more slide I'll show before we wrap up here. And now just to turn to the Edmonton Region Hydrogen Hub. Maybe actually Patrick didn't have that slides, but what I'll highlight is what we're doing in the Edmonton region is now pulling together this hub. So again, it's a partnership amongst governments, and it's now mapping out the vision for how do we roll out that hydrogen infrastructure more around the use side now, because we know to ensure we can continue producing low carbon hydrogen, we need to also be using it. So I know that Shannon at HTEC spoke to some of those activities going on, and same for Ontario. We're doing the same thing. We're really looking at those early sectors that will be using hydrogen, like heavy duty truck transportation. We also have blending projects in the Edmonton region where we're blending 5% hydrogen with the natural gas. That's ATCO led. One of our Alberta companies, and we also have pilot projects to move hydrogen fuel cell vehicles up and down the highway between Edmonton and Calgary. That's our major transportation corridor, just like in Ontario, the 401 from Edmonton to Windsor, from Toronto to Windsor. So again, we're mapping out where those key routes that will make most use of hydrogen infrastructure as early movers, and really receiving strong signals from our trucking companies. From other companies as well, and now even moving into things like our heat and power opportunities to make use of that hydrogen. So we will be producing hydrogen very shortly at a significant scale. Oh, thank you very much. And it's really now through this hub, looking at how we create some teams, whether it's municipal fleets, bus fleets, for example, commercial fleets, as well as that heat and power piece, to combine with that low carbon hydrogen supply and move forward. So we're really excited by this. Lots of support we've received from the provincial and federal government. Stay tuned in Alberta. The Alberta will be announcing its hydrogen roadmap very shortly. They have said it will come out in November. So that will really provide some continued stimulus, and innovation technology will be a key part of this. I haven't spoken too much to innovation and technology here. We're kind of focusing on the scalability right now, but at the same time, our provincial agencies, our federal funders have been supporting research and innovation as well. Things like new methane pyrolysis technologies, other clean hydrogen technologies, as well as opportunities to make use of hydrogen. So that's all I'll say for now, and look forward to the panel conversation.
Thank you very much, Brent. And again, I'll save the questions for afterwards, but I have to comment that actually what you're doing in Edmonton is like a template for producing hubs all across the country, and we're very happy to see how well you're doing with that. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Sierk.
Yes, good morning or good afternoon or even good evening, I understood. So I'm Sierk Coolsma. I am pretty new to the hydrogen market and also new to my company. I was wondering when I was invited to be here telling something about Canada and Turkey, what would be my relation to that? But surprisingly, there is. First of all, Highgear, the company that I work for, was acquired a year ago by Xebec, a company from Quebec, of course. And we are doing business more in Turkey than in Canada today. So that is maybe a good connection. I'm leading the sales operations in Europe. We have an integrated company right now with high gear, Xebec, and also a German company called HTEC, which is more focused on nitrogen and oxygen production. To give you an idea about high gear, so high gear was founded almost 20 years ago with the focus to provide on-site generation of hydrogen for specifically the mobility sector. But at that moment, you can imagine 20 years ago, not a lot of fuss was yet about driving with hydrogen yet. So the company found out that there was an interesting demand in the industry, especially the glass and steel manufacturers were looking for on-site generation of hydrogen. So this is in fact our legacy. The last few years we see more and more demand for also mobility and in other sectors. And we also expanded our operations worldwide. As you can see, we are having 77 installations worldwide in 18 countries, and we are doing this today not only with our Dutch office, because that is our backyard, but we also have offices in Singapore and Canada. And as you could hear, maybe I'm in Milan today, so in Italy we also do have some sales. We are also a company that has a lot of strong R&D backgrounds, and since that we also developed 14 patents of our proprietary system designs. So what do? We are generating hydrogen on site, and we're also recycling the hydrogen on site. Especially that this last part is very interesting. We believe we are still the only ones doing that, meaning we are picking up hydrogen from the burning process in glass factories, and we are cleaning up the hydrogen and nitrogen and process it back into the process. Since we are acquired by Xebec last year, we are now having a uniquely complementary technologies across the companies. As you can see on the left side, we are providing biogas upgrading with Xebec. Both Xebec and High Gear are producing also the gas purification and recycling. Then High Gear is mainly focused on steam methane reforming and electrolysis in order to do the on-site generation, and the oxygen and nitrogen production is being done through our company in Germany, Aromatics. So this is in a nutshell what we do, and I'm also very curious to hear the questions from the
Thank you very much, Sierk. That's actually quite very interesting because you're working for a global company here. So I'm going to ask 3 questions and then turn it over to general questions from the participants. But my first question will be for Shannon. So Shannon, we're very interested and would love to replicate the amount of fueling stations that you're working on in BC, but what mechanisms do you use to decide where to site them?
Thank you, Robert. So in BC, we look at our major transportation corridors and decide if we want to have a hub or a spoke or a destination approach to fueling. And so we've looked at the studies that the BC government has done, and then looked. So we do a layered approach of how to choose where the station is. We decided in Vancouver early on to create a massive activity, much like a hub. And so then decided to do that hub approach first, where we could really secure supply and distribution, and then move out. And so when we were looking at the stations, so we layer that on what the BC government data is. Then we start looking at the good corridors with our future trucking stations. We've been looking at the most utilized trucking corridors. And then we start looking at the stations and see who has the room. When you move into city areas, it's harder to find stations that have adequate space. So you may have willing partners, but there just may not be enough space on their site. So then we start our discussions with our fueling station partners of depending on which sites look like they have enough room. So it's really a multi-factored approach of working with the region, deciding what is actually wanted, and then figuring out which stations are going to be a fit. So we've decided to start with our station in Kelowna, and so that's not part of the Lower Mainland hub, and we'll then look to make sure that we can guarantee supply and have backup up there as well.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, so I have a question for Brent now. As I mentioned earlier, we're all looking to the Edmonton area as kind of almost a poster child for how you put a hub together. But how do you credit, like, what one or two single factors helped you develop the hub there that really kickstarted it? And maybe I can just preface it by saying the sense I get looking from coast to coast here in Canada is we're going to have a lot more people who want to supply hydrogen than we have off-takers. And so it seems that creating a hub, you need customers. So please let us know, how did you manage to collect that together?
Yeah, I don't know what the secret sauce necessarily was, but I think, the one I'd like to highlight is leadership, and it was municipal leadership from our region, where we have the mayors from, again, where Edmonton Global supports 15 or so municipalities within the region, and we've had 5 of those with the mayors, including Mayor Don Iveson from Edmonton, Mayor Alana Natu from Sturgeon County, really come together and drive this forward. And it's building off of that, I guess, that asset that we already have in the region. So it's somewhat easier maybe for Edmonton than other areas, because we have been producing so much hydrogen, and industry is moving towards that low carbon hydrogen. So it's resulting in the build out of infrastructure. But you're totally right. It really comes back to those offtake agreements and how do we now create that demand. So, that's really where the focus is now. What's really interesting, we have an Edmonton International Airport, and it's talking about being a net zero airport by about 2040, and hydrogen plays a real significant role in their plans. So we look at some ways to kind of anchor this hydrogen economy within the region, and that's really what our hub is now trying to do, is map out what would that infrastructure rollout be. So I've talked about building demand, but it's also about building out that infrastructure, and that's where governments will come in. And again, these strategies, these roadmaps from the provincial and federal government will be really critical to build out that infrastructure, both the refueling stations. We have a pretty good idea where those need to be. Now it's really just, moving forward and getting some of those supports in place to make it happen. We'd like to, build out that infrastructure for large scale use of hydrogen. That might mean pipelines. We have existing pipelines in our region that potentially could be refurbished towards hydrogen, or there may be a need for new pipelines as well, but we need to know what that demand will be. So we've been doing all that work to map it out now. We call it the base case for the region between now and 2032. And that we're actually having a webinar in a couple of days. We'll be rolling out that base case over the coming weeks. So it's really exciting. But again, we do need to, really keep focusing on that demand prize, because we won't be able to continue, the large scale production and the export opportunity unless we can also build up some of that local use case for hydrogen.
Thank you. And again, that reflects what I'm seeing in other proto hubs, if you will. Same issue. But again, thank you for that. So now I have a question for Sierk. So I'm looking at you're probably customer driven in terms of how you produce hydrogen, in situ or locally, but surely decarbonization and carbon intensity must become more and more of an issue. So can you comment on that? Do you see a pivot in terms of on-site production that is low carbon?
Yes, we do see that there is a change coming in the market. Of course, for a longer term, we are already providing the hydrogen to the heavy industries like the glass industry, steel industry, and much of that is of course gray hydrogen still. We think that 90 to 95% of the hydrogen being used in the heavy industry is still gray. And that has to do, of course, with the grid. Both gas and electricity grids are still full of gray sources. So that means garbage in is garbage out. We're now seeing that a lot of customers are raising their hands and saying, listen, what can you do to provide greener hydrogen to us? So also what Brent was mentioning in his statements, we're also working on CCUS, of course, that will create the intermediate situation for companies to at least reduce the CO2 emissions. But in the end game, we have to go to green, and that's why Xebec itself is already producing upgraded biogas, and that will very likely become a major source for our equipment in order to produce the hydrogen.
Understood. Excellent. Thank you. Do we have any questions from our participants? And I'm not seeing any in my chat bar, so I'm wondering if Naomi or Patrick have any that they see.
There are some in the Q&A box.
Okay, and I'm just going to pull that up. There we are. Thank you. So I'm just going to go through them. Do we have to use pure water for electrolysis? How much? And that's one question. And I can just say, maybe I'm going to answer for everybody. Yes. And the source of pure water is usually going to be domestic water. And the volumes are significantly low and will continue to be low until the hydrogen economy becomes rather significant. And so I don't think that's a near-term issue unless you're in a remote location. Here's a question from Tansel. Could Xebec give some details on the steel metal treatment application of on-site hydrogen that recently inked with a Turkish flat metal producer? So that's for you, Sierk.
Yes. So what we are doing in the steel industry at this moment is like I said, the on-site generation of hydrogen. So we are using, of course, the natural gas sources in order to do this. I don't know what the exact question was, how we do it, but we do it with steam methane reforming, of course.
That's probably enough.
Yeah. Okay.
I think that answers the question.
Good.
So I see a question from Nadir Javani in Turkey, and they say, how easing of pandemic lockdown can lay bare benefits of hydrogen technology in Canada and countries such as Turkey? What types of strategies would be deterministic in this regard? I'm trying to figure out how to reframe that question. I think what's being said here, because honestly, my own feeling is the pandemic may have slowed things a little in terms of decarbonization via hydrogen. But if anything, maybe that was the question. It's actually accelerated it in many ways. But I think it's not so much the pandemic. I think it's more and more evidence globally of changing climate that's getting people somewhat alarmed. And so it's driving governments to become more active. That would be my answer. But I'm going to turn it over to the panel. What do you see as the drivers towards more hydrogen uptake? And I see Shannon has her hand up, so let her go first.
So I've really seen how COVID has given us an opportunity to examine our priorities. And I think that the world was not prepared for the pandemic to happen. And I think it's given extra motivation and extra oomph behind being prepared for what we're going to see around climate change. And so it feels like things in this industry have sped up incredibly since just the year that, when I joined HTEC a year ago. Things had started to move a few years before that, but then the amount of investment that's poured into the sector in the last year has been incredible, and just the movement. It's things have sped up a great deal, and I really think that COVID helped give people perspective to really get moving.
Okay, thank you. Brent, Sierk, any comment?
Yeah, no, I would agree. And I was trying to maybe also reframe the question. I guess I was thinking more about things like partnerships and how we move forward. I think, again, we have companies around this table. I think business models tend to change around the hydrogen economy compared to maybe our traditional way of looking at the energy system. So I think we are on the cusp of some real significant changes. I'm not sure if the impact of COVID, but I think there probably is this. We're ready for some really significant transitions going on within our energy systems. So again, whether it's business model innovation, technological innovation, but again, partnerships may have a key role to play as well as we look to, I wouldn't say new alliances necessarily, but new formulations with companies, looking for the hydrogen opportunity, whether it's, how Canada works with Asia, how Canada works with the Middle East, how Canada works with Europe. So I think we are on the cusp of some real change in that regard.
Okay, thank you. Sierk, any comment?
Yes, what you saw during the pandemic situation is that business really slowed down. Of course, we are a global company, so traveling was part of the business, and that didn't happen. That doesn't mean that there was no business, because in fact we moved quite a lot during the pandemic period still. Even High Gear as a company was sold through MS Teams meetings without any physical meeting. Can you imagine? So right now we see that there is a major interest at this moment. Maybe it's because of the EU pushing everybody now to go for green. But also I saw last week during an exhibition in Bremen, Germany, that there was a major interest in how we can use hydrogen to get to a lower carbonized world. So,
thank you. And so there was one more question talking basically about, is carbon capture and sequestration really a low carbon source of hydrogen? And so I'm going to come out with a very general comment and maybe a little self-serving to that. And that is, in our conference on November 12th, we're going to have a session called The Colors of Hydrogen. And we expect to have a very lively debate, because there are so many sources of hydrogen now. And it's all about carbon intensity, of course. But what people always say is, well, which one is better, or which one can we use here? And my own feeling is it's all about jurisdiction. It's all about your confidence in whether in fact you can capture that hydrogen. And so right now in Canada, I see green hydrogen and blue hydrogen from Alberta, and even turquoise hydrogen from nuclear operators, and a new one that I didn't even know called turquoise hydrogen, which is from methane pyrolysis. And that's become my favorite technology, I have to say, because you end up with carbon black, which is pretty inert at the end. So the whole issue of decarbonization is patently obvious. So I'm going to maybe put an open question out there about just this general feeling of my own feeling is, as long as the carbon intensity is demonstrably lower, that we shouldn't worry about that right now. We should just create a hydrogen economy and move it on.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Robert, on that comment. I think it's about moving quickly, moving at scale, and recognizing continuous improvement in systems. So, I didn't mention, the one announcement that did come out in Alberta, in Edmonton, recently was the Air Products facility, and they're talking net zero. So, and that's really a combination of new technologies for carbon capture, autothermal reforming, as opposed to the more traditional SMR or steam methane reforming technology, as well as finding ways to make use of that generated hydrogen within operations. So that's sort of their methodology for getting to net zero. And I suspect over time there'll be even continued improvements. And we're improving things like CO2 storage over time as we get more experience with it. So I think it is regional. I think it depends on what assets you bring to the table, but it's also about moving quickly. And that's really why we think there's some really important and exciting things going on in our region, because we are in a position to scale up at a, very rapidly to support the hydrogen growth and build demand. So it's really about building that demand, and we need to have some scale in order to do that.
Agree. We have the same problem in Ontario, is how are we going to build demand? That's becoming job one. So I don't know how much time we have left, or if we've run off the end of our schedule. Do we have a timekeeper who can let us know?
I think there's a lot of questions, and it seems to be a very good discussion. I'm happy to give this panel maybe another 5-10 minutes.
Okay, and so I'm just going to again look at the question bar, if you don't mind. Give me a minute. For some reason, I'm having trouble pulling it up. Q&A.
Maybe I'll add some thoughts on the colors of hydrogen, and yes, just really echoing what you've said, that it's very regional, and we're not used to not having a one solution approach, but using the lowest carbon hydrogen where you can get it, when you can get it, is the approach, I think, to moving things forward. So in HTEC, we're always talking about what's the lowest carbon hydrogen we can get in whichever market that we're in. And so this is what I loved about hydrogen in the early days. It makes sense using the strengths that you've got. Mm-hmm. And obviously in Alberta, we've seen huge advances in carbon sequestration and reducing the price. And that's really exciting. And also in Alberta, you see, here I am championing Alberta from BC, but I was floored at the renewable energy contracts that have been issued over the last few years, and some of the lowest priced renewables in the country. And so there's a case to be made as well for not only blue hydrogen production in Alberta, but also green hydrogen production and distributed hydrogen production. So there's a case to be made regionally for a number of low carbon solutions.
Agreed. Okay, so when I looked at the Q&A bar, I didn't see anything there that we haven't kind of addressed already. So I'm going to ask one more question that's kind of, again, closer to my chest, and that is, when we look at transportation, the transportation sector right across Canada, and we see that the opportunity to switch from diesel to hydrogen in whatever mechanisms we use to do that, but in order to do that, we have to get the trucking industry engaged. They need an incentive. Trucking is such a commercial operation. You can't come to them with anything that isn't going to be commercial from day one. They need an incentive. And so can any of you share how do you see incentivizing this pivot to diesel transportation? Shannon, Brent?
Yeah, I can jump in some projects. We are looking at bringing the load to the project, and to really ensure that we don't have any stranded assets, that those stations are going to be used. So in our future planning for our heavy duty stations, we've got one station planned for the port out here in Vancouver. And are exploring other heavy duty stations where we are in discussions to secure that load for the station. So it's not quite the answer, but maybe Brent can add on that.
Yeah, it's a great question. And, I think we all recognize some forms of incentives are needed. I think we look at the future cost of diesel in comparison to hydrogen for trucking, for example, and it looks like it will be certainly competitive, but we still need to get that hurdle associated with the purchase of the vehicle. So one thing we're looking at, or just beginning to look at in our Edmonton region hydrogen hub, is what's that mix between, let's say, a hydrogen fuel cell truck or dual fuel truck. And there may be some ways to kind of accelerate the adoption of these technologies by looking at maybe dual fuel. So we have a Vancouver company called Hydra. They're quite focused on that opportunity. So, is there a way to work with those types of companies or those types of technologies to accelerate the integration of dual fuel technologies into trucking fleets, which could be, we don't know for sure yet, but it could be quite a bit cheaper than, purchasing a brand new hydrogen fuel cell truck. And some of those trucks just won't be available in the time frame, to allow for some quick use of hydrogen. So that's one area. And then I guess the question becomes, how can governments work to incentivize those changes? Is it capital cost incentives? Is it some other types of grant programs? So I think these are things that, we need to have those conversations, both with governments, provincial, federal governments. Are there roles for other organizations to contribute to that as well? So yeah, great question. I don't think we have the answer yet, but I think we do need to have some way to incentivize those fleet conversions.
Okay.
Well, and there's been a number of fleets that are operating in Europe already. And so, how we can try to incentivize those fleets to choose Canada as their next destination rather than another country is something that we're looking at, because the fleets are available. And when you create that infrastructure, it's kind of that old movie Field of Dreams, build it and they will come. So when you've got that base infrastructure in place, it's a lot easier to convince the manufacturers of the vehicles to deploy in your area.
And you're absolutely right. And we're hoping to lure at least some OEMs here to Canada. It'll be a tough call because this is an arena where a lot of global players see the where the goalposts are. And it's our challenge is to get our governments on board as well to see that. But that last comment though about trucking fleets in Europe, maybe that's a good pivot to Turkey. And I mean, this is basically, we're doing this also for Turkey to look at decarbonization and through the use of hydrogen. And I recall in the time I've spent in Europe, if there's one thing you want to do is convert from diesel. Diesel emissions in urban areas in Europe is really bad, or it certainly was when I was there. And so converting trucks in Europe from diesel to hydrogen is not only a great way to reduce carbon footprint, but it improves urban air quality. It improves air quality, period. And so I would strongly advise that that's, again, a mechanism for moving quickly into the hydrogen arena, is not just for low carbon, but also for clean air. How are we for time? My feeling is that we're kind of come to the end.
So absolutely, thank you so much. I think this has been one of the better panel discussions that we've had over the course of these 2 days. It's very fascinating, and there's been a lot of questions. So I think the audience supports me in that it's been a very interesting conversation. So I'm just going to pop something in the chat box. If there are any more questions that come from audience members, please send them to that email address. That's to me, and I will follow up with the panelists with those questions. So thank you so much to all of you, Brent, Sierk, Shannon, Robert. I think this has been, I very much appreciate the time that you've given to us. And, hopefully this will be the start of a broader conversation between Canada and Turkey.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, so Professor Eroglu, I believe you are on the line. I will, in the interest of time, and my apologies for going a little late, but we'll move straight into your presentations looking at the hydrogen landscape in Turkey. So I'll hand the floor over to you.
Thank you. I would like to express my gratitude for the invitation to this workshop. Well, let me turn on my presentation. Hello, everyone. I would like to thank the organizers for this collaboration meeting between Turkey and Canada. And I would like to express hydrogen technologies in Turkey, our expectations and preparations for future. Well, let me just briefly introduce myself. I'm a emeritus professor in Middle East Technical University, a chemical engineering department, and I'm also vice president of the Hydrogen Technologies Association of Turkey. As a Hydrogen Technologies Association of Turkey, we are organizing the 23rd World Hydrogen Energy Conference, which will be held in June 26 to 30 in 2022 in Istanbul, and you're all invited. So let me start with the distribution of primary energy consumption by sectors in Turkey. So all social and economic developments depend on energy. An important item of Turkey's imports is energy. The country has been paying heavy prices for energy imports for the last 30 years, and distribution of primary energy consumption by sectors in 2020 and 2020 could be expressed as the following. So power generation is 24%, industry 25%, especially fertilizers, cement, plastics, glass, ceramics, mining, etc. Residential use is 15%, transportation 20%, trade and services 8%, and other sectors 8%. Turkey has 84 million population in 2020, and it's more crowded than many of the EU countries. Young generation is more than 50% of the population. Energy consumption is increasing year by year. Turkey has a lot of renewable energy sources, even though we are importing 60% of the energy in Turkey. We have the potential for wind, solar, geothermal, and also hydroelectricity. And what is produced in Turkey, about 60% is from the fossil fuels. So if we look at the existing electricity production in 2020 and the expectations for 2040, about 41% of the existing share is coming from the total renewables in Turkey. So 28% is from coal, from Turkish coal, and 8% from the imported coal, and 23% from natural gas and LNG. Well, right now we don't have a nuclear plant, but right now under construction there are 2 nuclear plants, and expected percent share in 2040 is as follows. Increase in the wind and solar, and as a total, 59% of the produced electricity is expected from renewables. The share of coal, both bituminous, lignite, and asphalted, and also import, will be as a total much less, 15%. So Turkey has signed Paris Agreement, and therefore we are leading ourselves as in this strategy of lowering greenhouse gases. And also 11% of the electricity production is expected from the nuclear. Why hydrogen is important for Turkey? Well, long-term hydrogen costs from hybrid solar PV and onshore wind systems are showing that in future, this is from a report of IEA in 2019, the cost of the hydrogen will decrease. Well, Turkey in this distribution is in a good place. So using the solar and wind systems produced hydrogen price will decrease. Right now, of course, we know that hydrogen is a very valuable reactant in chemical industry. It is all produced from the fossil fuels. So in future, we are expecting to use hydrogen both in industry and in also transportation. So let me also talk about the biomass to energy conversion. Turkey is an agricultural country again, so we have important biomass, important amounts of biomass, and by gasification or by fermentation, we can produce the hydrogen. So let me just briefly mention about the projects we had carried out in Middle East Technical University. We had concentrated on the biological hydrogen production and storage of hydrogen with metal hydrides and sodium borohydrate. And we also concentrated on PEM fuel cells, both low temperature and high temperature PEM fuel cells. So one of the projects we had was a Hyvolution project, which is production of pure hydrogen from biomass by non-thermal processes. And in these processes, we had dark fermentation for production of hydrogen, and also from the outlet of dark fermentation by photofermentation, hydrogen and carbon dioxide produced, and by gas upgrading, pure hydrogen could be produced. Well, let me just briefly explain about the techniques we demonstrated and developed in fuel cell technology. We had developed an MEA, membrane electrode assembly, by an ultrasonic spray coating technique. And by this technique, we could produce 400 centimeter square large MEAs. And these MEAs could be used in the prototype 3 kilowatt PEM fuel cell system. So this was important that we could experience the stack design, short design, full stack, and process design and control system design, besides the CFD results with the air channels and water channels design, and MEA production. Finally, we obtained the PEM fuel cell system. But these projects were especially carried on between 2000 and 2012. And meanwhile, the students which worked in these projects are continuing with the further applications. So I just try to think about what could be the collaboration possibility and benefits between Canada and Turkey on hydrogen technologies in reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Well, first of all, people's interaction is very important. It's supervision and sharing knowledge, which we have done this within just 2 days. And collaborative projects will be very valuable. The financial support is critical here. And mutual interests in SMEs or startup companies are important for Turkey. And sustainability for achievement, that's the commercialization, is the last step, which is missing in our country. Well, so let me just list some of the pilot, demo, and application projects. We, of course, have unlimited project ideas, but limited support. So we should find a way to solve this problem. Well, some of the hydrogen projects in preparation or already in practice, I try to list them here. But one of them, for example, is zero emission and transportation in Metu campus, because Metu campus is quite a large campus and we always have service buses. A demo rail tram service filled with hydrogen working with PEM fuel cell would be quite applicable. Biological hydrogen production from biomass and wastes are going on, and hydrogen production by a demo solar power plant mixing with natural gas for pipeline distribution is already going on in Konya, which could be which they get good results. Also, the burner and boiler design and application for the mixing of blending of natural gas and hydrogen is important for the boiler companies. And hydrogen production by a demo wind power plant and storage. We have some experiences about that, but I believe that this should be further applied. Demo hydrogen filling station for tanks is carried out. Demo biogas solid oxide fuel cell electricity cogenerator is another project. Sodium borohydride is a very important material, chemical for us, for hydrogen storage. And sodium borohydride PEM fuel cell car, we have some prototypes and the research is going on. And development of PEM FC in unmanned air vehicles and underwater marine vehicles are also studied. Well, why these application projects are important for the future of hydrogen society? Well, future hydrogen society will exist if we can achieve the followings. In Turkey, we still need the interest of people. We need to achieve to mold public opinion. And so therefore, this could be started in the universities, institutions, SMEs, and startup companies. And then this could be applied in future. Commercialization is not much in Turkey. So especially in hydrogen energy supplements. So these companies, SMEs and startup companies, need innovative solutions, which they are doing it. We have very valuable people, engineers, scientists, and we have technoparks interconnected to universities, have the facility to incubate initiatives, inception of idea, discussing and communicating the auxiliary needs and interconnecting with research labs. There might be experts of these supplements, but how can we get in touch with them? This is a question. And mature hydrogen technologies available, which they solved already many problems, but how do we solve the problems of the developing new hydrogen technologies? Some critical steps in hydrogen projects are the major equipments. Well, there are research on electrolyzers, fuel cells, compressors, storage, but they're not commercialized. We don't have such a company. Auxiliaries are already produced in Turkey. Piping, valves, and fittings needs, of course, demand. And sealing, instrumentation and process control, safety precautions, sensors and alarms, others they may consider innovative solutions. Well, let me conclude my presentation. The development of domestic fossil resources are continued. So even in future, we will have some fossil resources, energy production from fossil resources. But however, we should not forget that these domestic and foreign fossil-based energies cause GHG. New energy sources should be researched and produced, and energy production should be diversified. We are aware of this, and Turkey is rich in renewable energy sources. For this, renewable electricity productions, such as hydroelectricity, wind, and especially solar energy, should be emphasized besides biomass and geothermal. And new hydrogen technologies need to be developed, commercialized, and applied for storage of renewable energy, because we know that renewable energy has a waving character, and therefore just sometimes there is more electricity produced than the demand, and this has to be managed. And the use of raw material in industry, such as fertilizers and steel, is quite promising. Emphasis should be placed on education, pilot and demo scale projects, and commercialization requires technology for both major equipments and supplements. And new hydrogen technologies need to be developed for a better world. So this is vital, because world is ours. Well, again, I would like to remind you about the World Hydrogen Energy Conference. We are inviting you to Istanbul, and I hope you can come, and we will have a chance to meet. And I also would like to acknowledge my students who are now either academician or having companies and going on with the hydrogen technology developments in Turkey. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Eroglu. That was very fascinating, a very interesting presentation. I just want to sort of echo your comment about the World Hydrogen Energy Conference taking place in Istanbul next June. I think that would be a really good opportunity to bring more Canadian representatives to Turkey to meet with their Turkish counterparts. I think that venue would be very, very, very timely, because I think by then it will be sort of a different world in terms of travel. I think people will be more comfortable again traveling and meeting in person. And I think since we're starting the discussion now between Canada and Turkey more intensely, by next June there will probably be more to discuss. And so I think that conference, the timing of that will be very good. So should there be any questions, please put them in the chat box. You're also free to send any questions you have to me. If you think of anything at a later date, I'll let you in the Q&A.
Is there any practical application of PEM fuel cell at homes or hospitals? All the best. Yes, there are some applications. I do not have right now a list, but I should say that we now have PEM fuel cell technology. We have developed that, but there isn't any commercialized product. So they are all in the case of, either prototype. But we also have solid oxide fuel cell developed. But right now, I really cannot tell you where and how much applied.
We're going to move to Professor Ibrahim Dincer, and he's going to do a summary of the 2-day workshop. Professor Dincer, do you have any questions for Professor Eroglu? I know she's a colleague of yours.
Nothing in specific. She has actually Professor Eroglu nicely summarized, and really identified, what specific areas would be suitable for cooperation. So I believe she has done the job. So thank you.
In that case, thank you so much, Professor Eroglu. This was a really informative presentation, and we're very appreciative of you giving us your time and we'll close your session now. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move to Professor Ibrahim Dincer, who is the president of the Turkish Hydrogen Technologies Association, and also the co-organizer of the workshop yesterday.
Thank you.
This would not have been possible without all his good work and collaboration. And he's going to do a roll-up, a sort of a summary of the 2 days of our workshop. And so I will hand that over to you, Professor. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Naomi. And really, you know, people say every good thing comes to an end. So similarly for this, you know, coming to an end. So it is important to provide a quick summary really about what has been discussed during the past 2 days. And I'd like to start with Mr. Hoskins' talk yesterday morning. Especially, he was one of the key people to prepare the strategic plan for Canada. And really emphasize a couple of things. This is very important. And really making the point that, you know, the color code is not that important. But what is important, the end result, and really stating that Canada is committed to achieve a carbon neutral economy by 2050. Then the next speaker, Dr. Hasekioğlu, stated basically three, I can make it four important things. One was really stating that there is no any specific strategic plan prepared by the government, while there are multiple reports available, strategic plan type, and also a sort of guiding reports prepared by various NGOs, including our own Hydrogen Technologies Association. And then mentioned that TENMAC is given sort of a responsibility to prepare a formal document or strategic plan about hydrogen. And by the way, I am also serving on TENMAC's board. And then also emphasize the importance of nuclear hydrogen. So especially for high temperature reactors in the form of SMRs. So it is going to be suitable to consider hydrogen as well. And then finally mentioned one additional point that boron is a significant mineral in Turkey, and Turkey is one of the really or the largest producer in Turkey, in the world, sorry. And that was a kind of important item coming out of the talk. And then in my talk, I got into a point that, you know, really emphasized a couple of quick things. And one was really COVID-19 pandemic closed the carbon age, but opened the hydrogen age. Now renewables and hydrogen really are the prime targets. And the hydrogen shouldn't be seen only as a fuel or energy carrier. So more importantly, hydrogen is gonna serve as a feedstock. This is more critical to make it to other fuels and chemicals. So eventually it will be really a hydrogen economy. And then there was a panel discussion session by Mr. Kirby, and this was really aiming to discuss Canadian capabilities on hydrogen and fuel cell technologies with the panelists from National Research Council of Canada, Ballard, and Cummins. And by the way, National Research Council of Canada is a leading actual government agency in Canada, especially related to strategic areas, including hydrogen. And as everybody knows, Ballard and Cummins are two global companies of Canada. And Cummins, of course, formerly Hydrogenics. So these are really leading in the field. And then the discussion came to a point that, then Canada offers plenty of opportunities for collaboration, especially coming down to hydrogen technologies, and there is a great opportunity. And then there was another panel discussion session, this time more academic version type, and then discussing research challenges, opportunities, and future directions in the field of hydrogen and fuel cell technologies. And then it was sort of an appealing discussion session where the academics really discuss the critical challenges coming down to, let's say, especially hydrogen devices, from electrolyzers to fuel cells, and how to overcome the challenges and really create better opportunities. And also, of course, provided some directions for future. So the second day, which is today, started with Professor Li. Professor Li has brought additional dimension into hydrogen storage, especially by stating that, aromatics, especially liquid aromatics, will be a great choice in terms of really serving as a hydrogen storage medium and being used in various applications, and also their on-site production. Also discuss one important technology as developed by themselves, a reversible hydrogenation and dehydrogenation process, and that is really important, and also highlighted the importance of photonic hydrogen production methods. So the following panel discussion session actually has brought a really lovely discussion into hydrogen technology development across Canada in particular, but overall there were also global examples by the European rep. And really, Mr. Stasko introduced the Hydrogen Council in Ontario. And also the discussion really came around, what specific methods and technologies and how to develop hydrogen hubs. And also it was clear that, the business model is gonna change, and the way it is set is going to be very important. And incentives, of course, will help to expedite the process. And also, of course, the discussion has come to a point that, and more colors will come into, and the color codes are not that important. And definitely to look at the overall achievement at the end, because if the target is to reduce carbon emissions, you look at the overall picture. So it was a quite interesting discussion. And then finally, Professor Eroglu has provided a quick energy summary about Turkey and what resources and what potentials, and then what specific potentials about hydrogen technologies, and also explained some ways of, let's say, for collaboration. And that has been something, a kind of closing type presentation. So finally ended up with me, and I have really enjoyed this particular event. and this was sort of joint. But anyway, the major work has come from the Canadian consulate, and Naomi has been the really key driver behind. And I try to help as much as possible, and really at the end to bring something to fruition. So thank you all for attending. Thank you, Naomi, for giving me this opportunity to help for both countries, Canada and Turkey.
Thank you so much for that amazing summary. I don't think anyone could have done any better than that, because I think you captured all the key points. Thank you so much. And I think you're probably the best figurehead of being Turkish yourself, and a president of the Turkish Hydrogen Association, and also a professor at a university in Canada. I think you really bring together the two, and I think you really are the driving force behind this. So thank you, and hopefully we'll see more come out of this, and more discussions and conversations between the private sector involved in hydrogen, both in Turkey and Canada, but also in academia. It'd be great to see more connections between universities that way as well. So thank you so much, Professor. And I mean, moving on from this, I mean, there's nothing else I can say except to thank everybody who's been involved, all the panelists, the moderators. A big thanks to Patrick, who's been behind the scenes, making everything possible, and fixing all the problems before they even happen, so that the audience doesn't really notice them. I should say that the recordings from yesterday and today of the webinars will be put up on our website. So those of you who have joined through the website, you will be able to come back to that website and see everything there. It will go up shortly. Those from yesterday are already on the website. And if there's anyone who would like to have an introduction or a B2B meeting, my email address is on the website. Please feel free to contact me. Oh, it's on your screen now. Please feel free to contact me. And once again, I mean, massive thank you to Professor Ibrahim Dincer, to Patrick, to all our panelists and our moderators, and thanks to everyone in the audience for attending and taking away from your busy schedules to spend this this time with us. So thank you very much. And have a good day to those of you in Canada, and have a great evening to those of us in Turkey.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody.